many people are so confused about the meeting that Pete Hegseth, together with Donald Trump, had with the American generals and admirals, and they say that the performance was somehow bizarre. And Pete Hegseth talking to generals. What was that? Do you think the main goal of the meeting was the domestic policy, what's going on under Trump? Because Donald Trump said it's a training ground for the army to go in the cities in the United States to learn how to fight, to go outside and fighting other enemies outside of the United States. What is your take on what is happening?
Well, I think there were multiple aspects of that. It was indeed a very bizarre gathering, unprecedented, really. And both the speech by President Trump, which was pretty incoherent, but very threatening toward political opponents of one sort or another, and toward cities that he mischaracterized as convulsed by crime. And also Secretary Hegseth basically trying to impose his, some people would call toxic masculinity on the assembled troops. But the question really is, why was this meeting held? And the best explanation that I've seen was passed on by Larry Johnson. And that is that this was cover for calling back CENTCOM commanders for an attack on Iran. That is to say, if Hegseth and Trump had simply called back the commanders in the Persian Gulf, then that would have signaled that an attack was imminent. But if they called back everybody, the attention of the world would be elsewhere. And this, therefore, was a deception. That is a possibility, because it does appear that aerial tankers and other equipment, aircraft carriers and the like, have been moving in the direction of the Persian Gulf. And as we've discussed before, and Trita Parsi has most eloquently explained, Israel has reasons to want to attack Iran earlier rather than later. So I think the JCPOA is finished on October 18th. So while it exists, there is arguably some basis, even though China and Russia disagree with the so-called snapback provisions, there is at least some basis to hold Iran to the terms of that agreement. But after the 18th of October, there won't be.
First time Israel attacked Iran, it was somehow a surprise attack. And the main goal was regime change in Iran. Looking at Iran today, I compare it to what it was before October 7th. Those people who were criticizing the government because of the policies inside the country, they were not happy with the policies. And I see those people today totally supporting the government in Iran. And they have changed in some cases 180 degrees.
Yes, I think that the net effect of the several attacks, actually 3 Israeli attacks on Iran, in one way or another, starting with the assassination, the murder of Ismail Haniyeh. I think the effect of these has been to rally Iranian nationalists behind the government and to cement support for the regime, which, as you indicated, many people disliked, but they now see it as essential to sustaining Iran's independence and sense of pride and identity against attack by Israel, joined by the United States. So I think, yes, the effect has been totally the opposite of what Israel wanted. And there's no reason to expect that more warfare will produce a different result.
If the attack in the first place has failed, and what can they bring to the new attack? I don't know if the United States is prepared to start the war together with the United States, or they're going to join it later on, or what's your take on that, and what Israel can get through these sort of attacks on Iran? I don't see the invasion of Tehran on the ground. They're not gonna go in that direction. Just gonna be aerial bomb. The fighter is going in the airspace of Iran, bombing the targets that they have in their mind. But beyond that, what would be the benefit for Israel?
Very hard for me to see any benefit other than the usual one of distracting everybody in Israel from the isolation that Israel is suffering and the opprobrium in which their prime minister Netanyahu is held globally, including very much now in the United States. There was an absolutely remarkable interview by Tucker Carlson of Jeff Sachs, very significant, very hard-hitting expression of American nationalist resentment of control by the Israel lobby and Prime Minister Netanyahu's ability to manipulate President Trump. So this would be a distraction. But as far as what it might do in Iran, I can't say. The Israelis are very devious and clever, and they may have come up with some new angle. Perhaps they've discovered where the enriched uranium went and are going after that. Of course, everything they're doing is in fact increasing the likelihood that Iran, despite the pledge of President Pezeshkian, will in fact go nuclear because Israel and the United States are together eliminating all means of defending Iran other than a nuclear deterrent. So they're making it more likely rather than less, despite the stated intent. But I don't see what this does. I have to say that if indeed, as I've heard, aircraft carriers moving in the direction of the Persian Gulf and tankers are assembling and so forth, this does not necessarily signal an American participation in an Israeli attack on Iran, because the defense of Israel cannot be accomplished without American support. And so this may all be preparatory to dealing with a predicted Iranian counterstrike. And here again, as I think Peter Parthy has most clearly expressed, if there is an attack on Iran by Israel, as Iran appears to expect, then I don't think the Iranians will be anywhere near as restrained or even restrained at all in their counterattack on Israel. So it's a very a moment fraught with a lot of danger.
The interview that you mentioned that Tucker Carlson had with Jeffrey Sachs, in which he said that during the 12-day war, Israelis in Washington were just moving around and just issuing orders to the people in Washington. And looking at the Trump administration and considering what we had with the Biden administration, it seems that the Trump administration is much worse than the Biden administration in terms of obeying what Netanyahu is ordering.
That is the case. I mean, Joe Biden and his administration were classically devoted to Israel along the lines of traditional American politicians. President Trump is far more extreme, and the people around him are far more extreme in their obedience to Israeli direction. And I mean, I think it's a fair thing to say that for decades, people in the Pentagon have feared the arrival of anyone from Israel. And I remember when I was Assistant Secretary of Defense, that when the Chief of Staff of the Israeli Armed Forces was coming to the Pentagon, everybody tried to nail their desk to the floor so that it wouldn't be stolen. And there was great resentment of the fact that Israel demanded things but never gave anything. And that is very much the character of the relationship to this day. And I think Tucker Carlson's tirade against Israel was quite justified.
Yeah. The other sensitive issue during the talk was the Al-Aqsa Mosque. He said that they want to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque and build a temple or rebuild the temple in instead of what that would be hugely. And considering the Al-Aqsa Mosque, I somehow feel I understand how the Muslim people think about the Al-Aqsa
Of
Mosque. That
course.
would be hugely consequential.
Well, that's a very complicated issue. And as you indicate, one of great emotional importance to Muslims everywhere, not just in the Middle East. It is the third most holy site in Islam for pilgrimage. And it is the project of rebuilding the temple, which actually may not have been on the Temple Mount. And there's some disagreement among archaeologists about whether that, in fact, was the site of the Jewish temple that they proposed to rebuild. There are two main groups devoted to that project. One is, of course, the zealots, the extremists in religious messianic Zionists who are devoted to this idea. This is why Itamar Ben-Gvir and periodically leads expeditions to the mosque and defiles it basically by entering it and by disturbing Muslim worship there. But the other project is that of evangelical Christians, because there is a passage in the book of Revelations which suggests that rebuilding the temple and conducting the sacrifice of a red heifer, meaning a young cow with reddish hair, would end the world, would bring about the end of days and the second coming of the Messiah, and that all Christians would be lifted up to heaven, and Jews would all be either exterminated or forcibly converted to Christianity. So on the one hand, you have Messianic Zionists. On the other hand, you have evangelical Christians who have a very anti-Semitic objective, namely doing away with the world's Jews, but doing it in the name of Zionism. So they are Zionist anti-Semites, a very interesting phenomenon. Anyway, I'm not a believer in either project, but I agreed with Jeffrey Sachs, who answered the question in that interview by pointing out that this would be a global earthquake. There are 2 billion members of the Muslim faith in various schools around the world. Every one of them would be touched by this. It's not as though Israel hasn't done enough to be hated. This would have cataclysmic effects. And here I'll just mention, I may have mentioned before, the classic answer of the late King Abdullah to a group from New York who asked him to be nice to Israel and implied that somehow that would benefit Saudi Arabia. I was in the room sitting with his advisors because I had a meeting with him after this group left. And I was listening to it. And the head of the group, a very decent man, but very committed to Israel, Jewish, leaned over to the king and said, you must be nice to Israel. And Abdullah, who didn't want to talk about this issue at all, he wanted to talk about economic reform in Saudi Arabia, replied, I have a message for you, Israel. You can take it to your friends in Israel. And the fellow from New York was thrilled. He was going to be an important intermediary, a breakthrough moment in Saudi-Israeli relations. And Abdullah said, tell them, if they want to be loved, they should do something lovable. And the fact is, they've done the opposite. They have done hateful things, and therefore they are hated. And I don't think there's anything that could make them more hated than to interfere with the Al-Aqsa Mosque. In fact, at the moment, because there are tunnels underneath the mosque, which they claim are for archaeological research purposes. This is very controversial because many Muslims believe that this is an effort to undermine the mosque and structurally weaken it so that it will collapse. I don't know whether that's a justified concern or not, but no, that project would have cataclysmic effects